So we'll again start with inviting question or two or one or something. I don't have a microphone. Touching.
I was just looking for the context of how we're going through this section. This is about the teacher, right? And about the application that the Bodhisattva does. You know, when we reviewed the section on compassion, it was giving proofs for how compassion could be developed. So now it seems like we're just going through kind of is it true that we're just going through a series of things that the Bodhisattva would train in to become a teacher?
Kasa di namsha di leo yu namsha na la lubjung dan lubdo ki shechu tso ki da dambu di samba Khensur and je chamo chik sumre ane kesane ane jor puji di tambe kechu di chik gotu re ane kundu ana di tambe kechu na la 두리아레 베스가 이나 안에다 제단 전지서법이 냠랭기 나가 따티 대시 거티 가사 담배 개척이 나 베스가
네 덤바 다음에 또 배시를 들어봐. 네 대시시에 인도 좀 봐. 네 다음에 대시에 인도를 봐. 다음에. 덤바 다음에 또 배시를 시에 네 다음에 또 배시를 들어. 아니 대시도 배시를 해야 돼. 김바시 개주주도 배시를 해야 돼. 지난해 아니 시를 붙으지. 다음에도 배시를 드려. 기타 김바시 대시 마다라서 주주도 배시를 해야 돼. 지난해 두수다 조직이 이
So the characteristics are, as you indicated, the first one is compassion. The second one is the quality of the practice. That is one of the main causes for achieving enlightenment is referred to as the teacher, and that is recognized to be mainly a reference to the wisdom that perceives selflessness. So in connection with that wisdom, then related subjects are then all four of truths. So wisdom that perceives all the aspects of the Four Noble Truths. And then among those, the most the principal form of wisdom is the wisdom that perceives emptiness. So you can think of it that way.
Yeah.
Art mentioned that there were 3 types of compassion. I think we went through 2 of them, and I thought maybe if you could just quickly explain the third. At first I thought you didn't really want to explain it, so you don't have to, but if you could just do like a short summary, that would be good. Thank you.
No, I don't want to explain it. Maybe I don't know what that is, so So this formulation is Mahayana teaching about 3 main kinds of compassion. So the first one, the more basic kind of compassion, semjin. So semjin sam la mikpe means to hold that other beings, to think of them in a sort of in a general way as being sentient beings who are subject to suffering in a more basic way, and then developing compassion. And it doesn't require one to have any special understanding about selflessness or any other deeper form of realization. Then Chola Mikpe Nyingje, the one that was identified with the teaching that was given in the morning about subtle impermanence and suffering, conditioned existence, is one where the person has developed that form of wisdom that perceives the Four Noble Truths, all of the 16 aspects of the Four Noble Truths in general, and especially then recognizing that all sentient beings consist of just dharmas, meaning just the 5 skandhas, and that their skandhas are impermanent and subject to the suffering, conditioned existence, and those beings who are so, that's the nature of sentient beings, but beings don't recognize that about themselves, and then cultivating compassion on that basis, understanding people to be suffering due to that lack of understanding. And the third one is deeper than that, which is that Mikpa Meva means there's no apprehended object, literally. Mikpa is an apprehension, and the object apprehended refers to a self-existent object. So if the practitioner, he or she, has eliminated any tendency in himself or herself to hold anything or apprehend anything as being self-existent, if you have developed the awareness, the view in which you do not hold to any self-existent objects, then you can view sentient beings as being qualified by that wisdom, meaning that they lack any self-existent quality. That's their true nature, that's their ultimate nature. And then with that wisdom, so wisdom and compassion are different mental qualities. Compassion is compassion. That wisdom is coloring the compassion. It means you're developing compassion towards sentient beings, recognizing they lack any self-existent basis. Their five skandhas are empty. They are also void of any self-existence. And recognize that about them, and then adding to that their lack of understanding regarding that true nature of their own being, then you develop compassion for their that ignorance which they are subject to. And that is considered a more profound form of compassion. So that's the third kind of compassion.
That is karasa langzu sundinanda dilera shuda chu shi gyuki cher saga leki chima tambe tangdi jagi jage muni sebar keshi jawaro nge sumji kinje meba nas negam tenda kiwe manamji nando senjo kepa chusi Ninji Nandu Samne Sinja Serva Ninji Su Jani Yamuruchi Janu Duba Shuda Chu Shi Gyungi Kin Doga Leki Chuma Tambe Tangdi Jagi Jawe Pus Numi Slipa Kish Jawaru Nge Sunji Kinje Meba Nar Nega Tinje Nandu Shene Niju Keba Jus Ranga Samne Samne Any Niju Keba Jus Niju Rang Su Jani Niju Riviera Pa Jani Ninji Riviera.
So we have in the poem, Tsongkhapa's poem, about three principal aspects or three principal forms of knowledge and awareness that are the essence of the path. In the second, the section that deals with generating bodhicitta, the verses describe, explicitly describe mother sentient beings, that you should reflect that mother sentient beings are, then shukta chuo. Chuo is a word which means like a powerful, like flash flood. It's not an easy word to use in English, but it means a very powerful river. And then there are four so-called floods like that, or four flash floods that are Abdharma terms for the mental afflictions. And so the mental afflictions then carry us along by their very powerful current that we cannot withstand. So then that's one line. Then what is the other one? The karma, the very strong karma, like the shackles of karma bind people. They're swept along in the river, but they're not free. They're bound up by the shackles of karma, which are difficult to overcome. So maybe you're familiar with these lines. But the verse, the lines generally are understood to be the way to reflect in order to develop compassion towards other sentient beings. And as long as the Dalai Lama has in the past when he was talking about these verses, he said you can just as easily use those same lines and apply them to yourself. And so when you apply them to yourself, then the last line says, reflecting on mother beings in this way, you should generate the supreme supreme aspiration to achieve Buddha. Then you can substitute for that last line, if you reflect upon it in relation to yourself. May I be able to generate the ultimate form of renunciation. So the same subject matter can be used to cultivate both renunciation and also bodhicitta.
다디 군주 된가이바 다 군주 등에 등바샤 제주 시샤 자수나 다 군주 된바스 그 군주 된바스에다 가르쳐는 아니 등에는 제주 시샤버디 지다 파번은 경우 된바리 밥에 땡가에 시가리 인시시도 밥에 땡가스 파바남지 동네 된 동네 미타바타 된 수수 주남지 동네지 대화 징계야리 동네 대화 때네 시베 춘도의 대화를 징계야가 대회 벌금 그 파바남지 동네를 얘기야가 어째서 댐바문에 댐바 파바남지 지들 심바다를 저는 내가 예산에 밥에 댐바스기야 대시켜 주지게 다음에 댐바스야지.
So in the morning session we were mainly discussing the four aspects of the noble truth of suffering, so-called noble truth of suffering, Arya truth of suffering. We started to talk about the second noble truth, the Arya truth of origination. So it's worth noting, what does the term noble truth or Arya truth, why is that part of the name of the teaching? So Arya truth, noble truth, noble refers to Aryas. So it's explained as those things which are true for Aryas. Aryas are the ones who see reality, who see things as they truly are. And the Four Noble Truths teach how to gain that understanding. They describe how reality is. And the Aryas are the only ones who have the ability to see the truthfulness of those teachings. So they are because they are true for Aryas, in the sense that Aryas see that reality is just the way the truths are described. Therefore, they're called the Arya truths, or the noble truths. Then, by contrast, in the case of the truth of suffering, noble truth of suffering, then typically those non-Arya, so-called ordinary being, pratyekjana, or the person who's still subject to the mental afflictions and mistaken understanding, then elements of samsaric existence, which are then in an ordinary way or in a common sense way thought of as being the excellent kinds of life or form of existence in samsara. For example, to be born as a human being, and to be born as a human being with great wealth, and to be born as a human being with beauty and comfort, great comfort, and then even the worldly gods, their existences are, as they are described, as being, even in comparison to humans, just so great and so overwhelming in their excellence. So the ordinary person thinks those are the ideal form of existence. Those are real forms of happiness. And that's an error. That's identifying some element of samsaric existence as true form of happiness when it isn't. So even that kind of pleasure, even that kind of well-being, ordinary well-being, the Aryas recognize truly as being unsatisfactory, as being therefore a form of suffering.
다티제 다티는 기체중미부터 시절이더라. 다 동안다 다음에 봐서 동안세야지 라팔 자야지야지 라팔 자는 떡지 라마지 동안스 가사티 따바 치르바기 따바 아니 지구와 아니 라마 스제니 떡지 라마지 다 키야는 거예요. 이 동안에 스제니 동안 직시 다음에 봐서 랑은 다 도마트버리 직시 다티 딩부버를 재면은 나랑 다 도마트버스 다음에 가서 다음에 참았다 주의 다음에 참그 진단 그 차라 개발매 가사 때문에 그때 가사를 다음에 참으시 풍불러서 같은 밤에 그때 주의 다음에 참으시게 해. 나티에서 딩부버를 제일 대시시에나 대시시에도 꿈이 잘못된 법이야.
이 동백 넘버들라 안에 정심에 between cigarettes.
다음에 봤어야 되라.
So we talked a little bit about the third and fourth aspects of the truth of suffering, noble truth of suffering, the meaning empty, the aspect of being empty, that the five skandhas are empty, and that they are also have a nature that they do not constitute a real self. So there is a kind of more conventional Buddhist interpretation of those two aspects, which from the point of view of the Pasangika school is considered to be rough, a more not invalid or not not mistaken, but does not represent the ultimate interpretation of those aspects of the truth of self. So the more conventional interpretation is that the attribute of emptiness, or the aspect of emptiness, is that the five skandhas are void or empty or lack the quality of being in any way related to a self, which has, and then the three main characteristics of a soul or an atma, which is common to most of the non-Buddhist traditions, a belief in a permanent self. And so those three attributes are that the self is permanent or unchanging, right? That it's different from the elements of ordinary experience that are subject to change. But the soul, the self, is an unchanging substance or entity. That is like ultimate. Then that chik means that it's a singular thing, it's one, a singular entity. And rangchen means that it has some kind of self-governing quality. So that's a rough form of the aspect of being empty. And then the fourth attribute of selflessness is that no aspect of the five skandhas can be identified as constituting a self, a real self. But the Prasangikas interpret these latter two in such a way, they say the ultimate meaning of selflessness, the selflessness of the person, for instance, does not allow for the five skandhas to be self-existent. So just as the five skandhas are self-existent, the nominal self that is recognized as being a conventional entity, it too does not have any self-existent nature. Whereas the conventional view is the nominal self is identified with some aspect of the five skandhas. The nominal self, not the real self, but the self that we use in ordinary speech usually would be identified with some element of the mind. Doesn't they say that's wrong? The true nature of selflessness is that it's on the same par with the selflessness of the skandhas.
That is 다음에 더지 라완첸 시주든가 그 인지가 메드베에서는 따바리 인식이야. 아니 차시엘 메드베에서 지구리. 아니 풍부한 메드베에서는 라완와시게. 풍부한 메드베 라완와시제. 더지 라완첸 시에디.
So those three attributes that were described in relation to the aspect of emptiness, permanent, a single entity, and a self-determining entity, can be understood as meaning that the soul, or the real self, as understood by non-Buddhist traditions, is something which is not subject to impermanence. So it is, in that sense, permanent. It's unchanging. It is singular in the sense that it has no parts. It is an indivisible unity. And thirdly, that it is so in the fact that it's self-governing is that it exists independently of the five skandhas. And so it's not dependent on the five skandhas for its being.
That is 다지 란주가 메제트 가서 다음에 시도던가 가서 란게트에 제일 동안 들으시게야 돼. 가서 다음에 시야. 기타 동이 가가리. 다지 텐주들로 있는 가서의 다음에 또 동이 또 그게. 이해선다. 가서 다음에 전출 다음에 뭐라죠? 차라리 냈지. 동시를 때 지켜봐 이거 좀 쉽지. 디땡이 동물이가
So just to kind of restate the point that was just made, to make sure that you got it, then so there are a range of Buddhist schools, generally four major Buddhist schools, and in particular the middle way school or the Madhyamika school has two divisions to it. The Swatantrika Madhyamika school, which is the school that adheres to the requirement that you can only prove emptiness using an independent syllogism. That's what Satantra is. There's Prasanghika school is that you can't use an independent syllogism to prove emptiness. You can only use what is it called? An indirect proof or a reductio proof. So that separates those two schools. So from the school of middle way school that does assert the need to use independent syllogism, and all the other schools that fall under it in terms of their considered less refined, all of those schools share a position about the nature of the personal self. That the selflessness that needs to be established in relation to a subjective person or real person as being the antidote to the mistaken belief in a real person is of a certain order of knowledge. So there's a phrase, kansak. Kansak means person. Rangyatuba means self-subsistent. Self-subsistent means able to stand on its own. Rangyatube. Zayur means to be a real entity, a real substance. Meaning that there is whatever the self is, it's a real thing, and it's a self-subsistent thing, doesn't depend on the five skandhas. And that's a mistaken belief in the self. So for the five skandhas to be empty of such a person is the meaning of the selflessness of the person. So you don't need to perceive emptiness to perceive the selflessness of the person. The Hinayanas can achieve nirvana, perceiving the selflessness of the person, and still believing wrongly that things are self-existent. All the schools, other than the Prasangikas, accept that ultimately. All the Mahayana schools make a distinction between the selflessness of the person and the selflessness of entities. Usually when you say selflessness of entities, it means the empty nature of the five skandhas. And in all the schools except the Prasangikas, emptiness is something that is established only in relation to the five skandhas. It doesn't. That is, emptiness does not need to be and is not established in relation to the personal self. So the emptiness of the person, or the lack of reality of the personal self, is one that was just described, of a self-subsistent real entity. The Prasangikas say that notion of selflessness of the person is only a rough explanation or interpretation of selflessness of the person. The true understanding of selflessness of the person is that the object of the belief in the person is not self-existent, and that object of the mistaken belief in a real person is not the five skandhas. It is the nominal self. So the mistaken view that the nominal self is real is the belief of a personal self, and the recognition that that nominal self is not real has the same status as the recognition that the five skandhas are not real. Both of them are a form of emptiness. So the selflessness of the person for Prasangikas is a form of emptiness, just as the selflessness of the five skandhas is a form of emptiness. And that's a unique position of the Prasangika school. No other Buddhist school holds that position. So the distinction between nominal existence versus real existence is interpreted in various ways in different schools. But the more coarse explanation of the selflessness of the person says there is no individual, there is no person that is substantially real and self-subsistent. or Rangyal means able to stand on its own, literally. That's a kind of independent status. So, but those two terms of being real and being self-sufficient are similar in the sense that the characteristic or the standard for saying that something is real or a substance, a real substance, is that it can be apprehended directly, independent of anything else. Whereas something that is nominally existent means that it can only be recognized through some other, on the basis of or through some other entity. So there is a nominal self. A nominal self, what we think of as when we talk about people as in an ordinary, everyday sense, that is meaningful. But that nominal self is in the explanation of this school is something that we can only conceive of, or we can only gain some awareness of on the basis of the five skandhas. Independently of the five skandhas, we could not generate the sense of our own subjective being. So when we say I'm speaking, for example, then it's through the act of expressing words, making sound of meaningful speech. Then we can, on the basis of that, we can infer some sort of nominal subject that is the speaker. But the idea is that nominal self could not be apprehended independently of that element of one's, in this case, body, that you speak through your body. So the notion of a self is that something that is only nominally existent. It has no real substantive status by which it's able to be identified on its own. So that's kind of a little bit more explaining that basic view of selflessness according to those schools.
다들 some Jampa 제ben했더니 나라님이 받았다 그는 시험이 제일 있어요.
Yes.
라님이 받아 출신이 받아 그때가 아니 로이 도토리 근데 라리 시험이 라리 유튜브 와라 신다지 내고 매래 풍불을 뜨기야 말이 그때 시신다지를 뜨기야 말이 그러나 라리 유튜브 사실상은 맞도 그러나 라리 유튜브 도토리야 가사디다 시험이 유튜브 와라 그 당시지 로이 차고래 당시 오늘 수가는 당시 지야와 그때 당시 지를 차니티 차이미 시티도 가사디고 이게 또 초담의 샤브리 미시티 파테야 메르바 가사디리스 때야 메르바 어떤 그냥 가사라문은 뭐좀 팀이 버지는 가사디리스 때 라이브가 있는 나바시바디 가사이스지 잉그베르바 팀이를 디아마리 수다 수승이 초담의 때 다샤지상 아니 콜루이 차와래 또 풍부루이 차와래 때는 그 통샤고리 미시지 그래 시엔데 kopatse가 지니 디 가사리스지 미두가 어디 있었다 가사디 따이레 제일 많이 쓰게 테이블에 가사 따이레 가사 테이블을 최상제 따이레 제일 중요한 말이에요.
So this distinction between things that are substantively real or that are real substances versus things that are only nominally existent should be understood the way it was just used. If we kind of single out a particular Buddhist school So for the mind-only school, Chittamatra school, for instance, they believe there is only one kind of real substance, and that is mental in nature. So the mind is the only thing that exists as a real substance. So we use this expression of the element of the mind that is aware of itself. One aspect of the mind when you have any cognitive experience is that there's sort of an observer or a witness, which is that self-awareness quality. So that self-awareness aspect of the mind, that is mental and that is real, and it perceives its object. To understand, to grasp it in the mind, it's not necessary to rely upon some other entity in order to gain an understanding of what it represents, as was used before to talk about the nature of the self. So that's one way of distinguishing between substantively real or real substances and nominally existent things. So for that school, the self is there is a nominal self that exists, but that nominal self is not a real substance. And nevertheless, for all the other schools other than the Prasangika school, that anything that is nominally existent, in order for it to be valid, its nominal existence has to be based upon something else that does have some more real underlying or some independent quality in order to validate it. So typically the nominal self is associated with the mind. So when we talk about the self, ultimately that term has to be identified with our mind consciousness, usually. But the Prasangikas have a radically different point of view. For them, there's no such meaningful distinction between substantively real and nominally existent. For them, everything is nominally existent and only nominally existent. Nothing is substantively real. So for them, when we perceive the self, it is necessary for us to perceive to form the notion of a nominal self based on our five skandhas. We experience our five skandhas, and then the five skandhas become the underlying conceptual basis that allows us to form conceptually the notion of a self that is associated with those five skandhas. But that nominal self is not to be identified with consciousness or any other part of the five skandhas. So in that sense, their interpretation is more radical. And that distinction needs to be, it's useful to understand that difference between the Prasangikas and all the other schools, especially as it applies to how to understand the nature of the personal self, or lack thereof.
Tati Gyumed, Tati Kunjuga number she are. Kunjuga number she is. Tati Nyomo Kunjuta, Ani Lake Kunjuiba, Nyomo said Karis and a simple my shiver chimney. Ani Chelechi, Kidechi, Simjus and Kidechilia, Nyomo Sigari. Ko rangi le ke suna ani rangi sem tu mashi bachi ni tinde ki she bachi le ya ani ko nyamu si ya.
So just as the truth of suffering has four aspects, so too does the truth of origination. And typically we focus mostly on that. So each of the names of the Four Noble Truths represents one of its four aspects. So the truth of suffering, one of the four aspects of the truth of suffering is suffering. One of the four aspects of the truth of origination is origination. There are three others. So when we're talking about the truth of origination, that usually is identified as being made up of two elements. The element of the mental afflictions and the element of the impure karma. So the defining or the common quality that applies to all of the mental afflictions, all of the root mental afflictions, all of the secondary mental afflictions, is that the word klesha means something which is an agitated or an unsettled state of mind. So the mind that's free of the mental afflictions is a kind of state of calm equanimity. But anytime a mental affliction becomes manifest in your mind, whatever form it is, there is some aspect of it that is unsettling to the mind as a whole. So that's kind of the basic quality that's common to all mental afflictions.
다들 명몽세한테 하고 세한테 디스타 유모텔라 자이 명몽바스 예 명몽바스 미야 자레스 듣고 유모쳐를 지금 부이야 되게 그야 유모 그랑이 차도 유모하고 이제 부이야 그래서 자이 명몽바스게 다들 제자 시다 아니 그래
이거
지금 제자 시다 뛰는 나게지 말이부터 뛰는 지지 아니 제동들에
네, 그래서 아니
다왔지 어떻게 누야 그래 자이 있는 거 좋으시게
So when we're talking about the mental afflictions, in particular as the object to be abandoned, generally that's associated with what are called the root mental afflictions. And the root mental afflictions are kind of the most prominent or the most significant aspects of those unsettled minds. Then there also are so-called secondary mental afflictions. Those secondary mental afflictions are not distinct in nature from the root mental afflictions. They're generally a secondary form of one or another of the root mental afflictions. So the root mental afflictions are identified as typically as being 6 in number. Then desire, hatred, ignorance, pride, doubt, and this last one is then mistaken views, not wrong view, but erring views. And then following the formulation of the Yogacara school of the way of identifying root and secondary mental afflictions, then the Yogacara school generally has a category of 20 secondary afflictions. Yeah, 20.
다들 장이 주제 다들 이제 지시하는 장이 주제
So we won't take the time to enumerate all the secondary mental afflictions, or subject of the root mental afflictions is could be done at length, but we're not going to do that.
다들 안에 지금 간가 심중 인식이 너무 간가 저를 생각해 그 만아주 저를 생각해 그 개부터 어떻게 심중세나 딩콜도 내리 진행 소리 때 저를 생각해 그 제사다 저를 생각해 그것도 심중들의 집에 집에 차지 다가 지수마 야 방제 차지 야 논의 차지 소심 그런 야 비야에 소심 디 되니 그 콜들라 아니 명문과 세지야 되니 콜심 중 들었다 남만 주지 제티 있었다 조심 세트고 다른들 조선세티 어디 다저 진짜 문도 세리 미차세야지 샘 세리 미차디 안 로세야지 샘 세리 미차세 샘 세야지 조선 기시에 이차디 세리 미차디 안 로세야지 다 신주들의 야만중에 국가에서는 여자들 시단 두수 년도도 디마시 매주니 진짜 다째선 선세리 차시도 이안 란시네리시아 지아르가 선세리 차디가 란시네리시게 어디에서다 신주세 그리고 내가 제도 그 게임 제도 맨눈이 들려야 차버를 지는 제도 게임야 그 매번 시분이 지어봐 어디 다 주는 세야지 이게 맨데서 제
So,
차범은 주인데 주신 디아리 여와중 주신 디아리
Gawat King.
오늘 주네 다티 그래서는 그 다 시다를 주면 우리 그래서 시다에 베신 로디게 인디 시다 로디 네트로 봐 시다한테 로디게 인디 다시 시다에 베스 인디다기 오늘도 막 두두 말이지 그 매부터 수고 말봤다 이게 매부 수행이 문무부터 수다원에 매부 수행이 됐다지 말이다 디지 담배도 시를 들어봐 저 이장구 얼굴을 깨요 대자면 얘기 소리지 신지야 다들 신중세야 돼 신들이 다 양비의 소리래
So we need to become more clear or more knowledgeable about the nature of our minds. Our mind is not just one amorphous thing. Rather, so the mental afflictions, so just root and secondary, represent an aspect of the mind that are referred to variously. I remember in old days when I was younger, they referred to them as mental derivatives, which is a very literal way of translating the word chaita. Nowadays, more commonly, they are referred to as mental factors, probably because they are included in the fourth skandha. So the fourth of the fifth skandha is made up of sort of secondary elements of the mind, which are generally identified and recognized as carrying out some or another kind of mental function or action, and they're identified by their essential quality and particularly how they affect our life in a good way or in a bad way or just enabling the mind to function. And they're all in the fourth skandha, all the mental afflictions. The fourth skandha is not limited to the mental afflictions. There are other sorts of mental factors there as well. Basic forms of mental processing, of cognitive processing in all kinds of sensory perception and mental consciousness. Then there are basic functions that are necessary for that to take place. Then there are virtuous mental states. So the various categories of mental factors, two of which are the root mental afflictions and the secondary mental afflictions. Then the fifth skandha is made up of awareness or consciousness, usually translated as consciousness. And consciousness is a kind of different category of mental entity in the sense that it's the more primary element of the mind. Various ways of thinking of it. Rinpoche described it, the way that we need to be aware of it is that it's the quality of the mind that has two aspects to it. That it is luminous in the sense that it can perceive things. It can shed light, metaphorically speaking, on objects. And Rigpa means, and it can also gain an understanding about objects. So that sort of luminous awareness is kind of the essential way of thinking of the primary aspect of our consciousness. And that's something that, while it's momentary, it is something that stays with us. And in particular, we can think of it as that quality of our mental being that is elevated as we develop along the spiritual path. That's kind of the most underlying and important element of our consciousness that we're trying to refine. The secondary factors, mental factors, especially those that are mental afflictions, but it also applies to virtuous mental states. What's significant about them is that they are temporary, and they are occasional in the sense that they may or may not be present in mind. We can have states of mind where the mental afflictions are not actively present, or secondary mental afflictions. And then there can be occasions when they do become overt. And the mental afflictions, in particular, along with the secondary mental afflictions, are those elements that we say have an obscuring quality. They are obscurations. They prevent the mind from being able to gain transcendent awareness, for example. Also, these secondary mental factors are kind of subsidiary to the main element of our awareness. And they're thought, typically in Tibetan they use the word that they are sort of the retinue or the accompanying elements of the mind. But the principal aspect of our mind is the main awareness. In particular, the mind awareness, mind consciousness, and then among the elements of mind consciousness, then the fact that the mind consciousness it has a pure aspect to it, which is its lack of self-existence, then that is the mind's then capacity to become enlightened, mind consciousness, and that is usually referred to as Buddha natures. So that element of mind consciousness, which is untainted, is something that we think of as what we're trying to develop, and is the basis that we kind of follow as we make progress spiritually. The mental afflictions are not like that, in that they only are present during certain circumstances. At other times they're not. But during the time that they are not active, that doesn't mean they are non-existent. What it means is that they take on a dormant state, and that means that the potential for them to reappear remains. And the only way to eradicate them is to eradicate that potential, the seeds of those mental afflictions. So when we achieve transcendent realization, what we're doing is we're destroying the possibility of those dormant qualities to reappear. And that can only be accomplished by the wisdom that perceives the nature of reality. So these are all related in the sense that they are part of what we need to know about our own minds, especially as pertains to spiritual path.
That's 다 레세아티 아니 레세아티 제리다 간수레 레기 칭이세는 지다 레세아티 신주 생바세체 신주 생바세 신주 납주자지나가 신주 생바세이체 어디 레노를 치여게 그 신주现在生 yuri yuri jingeti sympathy jigi sympathy le ting shari ku le kari chigere sene ku yuri yuri chigere silba ta yuri yuri chigi ku kunung cheni yudila soju le chigi ne soju le yuri chigere di ta sembele sigete ta yoni soju gi soju di sambele yang chi ne ba ma di sambele ta di chi ma le chi di lu le wa di sa soju ba ta du du chi semba chi ba soju ba ta du semba chi sinju semba chi Picota le sembele tati so chöbe luigi chicherba de luigi number chire ting tam di luigi number chire chire le luigi le
sa kanjeki go
tambo di luigi number chi kunun ko chi luigi ta pat Mr. Sinjasegin Sinjasegin Luigi Chichero. He would consent to Kunu to Kupier. That Lugi number is Chisi. That is getting you a cook name. That could the Vengon number immediately suture chat. Teachers and that is. Anani bacha chisha bacha sim sha ani ti je buti tingde ba jesa tambuti so jubene go su semba chiarba ti sembele che so jubene ligri chi chiarba ti ligri esia ya Juma is Juma teacher. You know, lazy. You get on the lady. She will do the general lady. That is, I keep a general lazy to the Sinju symbol Sharia. That we so you may make up the Sinju Cherba, Kunun Cherba, that it is now that you to the legend, Semba Cherba, then I have to get it. Young you so to the you reach it to the Semba Cherba, there you bless it. The thing you will do down Chirama. You will look at you led you the teacher yes. Now the teacher yes. Simply said it doesn't much.
So then the other main element of the truth origination is karma. So karma then in the Abhidharma is generally described as being two kinds of karma. One is uses the word semba. Semba is chetana. Chetana is I remember people translating the word as mentation. It's a weird word. It refers to a particular mental factor, one of those secondary mental factors in the fourth skandha. And it refers to the mental factor which is an impulse. Sometimes translated as volition nowadays. Volition is the desire to do something. In a sense it's that, but it's also more subtle than that. The actual definition of it is it's the quality, the mental factor whose essential quality is that it drives the main mind to engage a particular object. It causes the mind to be to move or to be driven to some particular object, some mental object. So any impulse that drives the mind towards an object, that is the mental factor that's called semba into it, or chaitanya. In the larger, so that's a kind of psychological definition. In the larger sense of karma that affects our lives, typically that quality is identified with the intent to do something, or the impulse to do something, or the thought, I would like to do this. And that is referred to as that aspect of karma. Then when you have that intention or that impulse or that volition to carry out a particular act, then certain kinds of acts, physical acts for instance, then require you to exert some sort of physical activity, or verbal acts involve some kind of verbal activity. Then the schools, the different Buddhist schools have some slight different ways of explaining verbal and physical karma. So verbal and physical karma are different from volition. Volition is mental karma, and that's kind of the root of all karma. Then verbal and physical karma are described as that karma which is the result of, or which is produced by that initial volition. So it's karma that has been reflected upon, in the sense of, if you want to carry out the intention to do something, to take a life for instance, then you have to do some kind of either physical or verbal action to bring that intention to fruition. And so whatever physical activity or verbal activity will be able to carry those kinds of acts out, then that is sambele, or the karma which is a result of thought, literally. Chetai va, it means the past participle, something which has been thought of. And then the kind of the philosophical sense, one of the distinctions that are made is that the act of physically, for instance, stabbing someone with a knife, for instance, to kill them. So that's a physical act that can be, it's referred to as an informative form. Informative means other people can understand your intention by that orientation of your body. If they see you stab somebody, they know that you have something against that person, because in their mind there's some motivation, that either desire or hatred or the like, that drove you to do that. So the very instant in which you stab the person is the first moment of completing the physical act, for example. And then the kind of most naive realism, the Vaibhashika school, and the most refined school, the Prasangika school, both of them claim that the orientation of your body when that physical act is carried out is the essence of the physical karma, for instance. And when you speak words such as a lie, the sound of your voice that is giving expression to the lie is the verbal karma. But only those two schools identify physical and verbal karma with something that is physical in nature. All the other schools say that those physical qualities are morally, neutral. They themselves inherently are not immoral or moral. What makes them moral or immoral is the intention that is the impulse for those physical and verbal acts. So physical karma and verbal karma, be it good or bad, for kind of all the other schools in between, is explained as being the form of volition that is the impulse to carry out that physical activity or that verbal activity, rather than the physical entity itself. So those are kind of technical things. The significant thing about verbal and all three of those, physical, verbal, and mental karma, is that the manifest form of volition, the manifest form of that first moment of bringing another person's life to an end, or completing the act of uttering a lie, for instance, that's the initial moment of the karmic act. in the moment following that, then there's no more evidence of especially the physical and verbal forms of karma. So it becomes what's called the non-informative form, right? Meaning that it's no longer capable of being perceived, but it is the act itself is not without consequence. By having engaged in the act, in the second moment, you establish some kind of potential, some kind of karmic seed, just as the mental afflictions have seeds. The karma has its own seeds, which are a capacity that is infused in your being, and usually it's understood as being infused in your mind consciousness. So where the karmic seeds are stored, or where the karmic seeds are, associated with your being, is usually associated with the mind. And then as the mind consciousness continues, those seeds also have an impermanent continuum. And those seeds carry the potential that whenever the right circumstances present themselves, then those seeds will ripen and manifest some kind of karmic result. So that's kind of an overview of the doctrine and how to understand the subject matter of karma.
That's 알레싱이디 군 센터 군코 담기디 레무시 생기야 말이 센레레스기 미시 삼베레스야티니 무시 군우디 세시베니가 군우지아바
나네.
생기기 생각.
네.
나다디 디 삼베레스기 다다기 버체나 디 삼베레스기 다디 레디 디 생기 시순에 마 메버레체스 그니버지 생기들이 샤시게 아니 슈마티기 그때부터 디제지 인물과 제스 냐와레 기비는 냐와레 기야기 그 소주기 레제시는 메버지 생기들이 샤야 야리 디 메버지 슈마 냐와레 핑기야과 우리가 세지를 시간하면 제니 서치도 그렇고 시간하면 제 서치 이렇게 서치 때문에 치게 근데 붙이게 됐으니 이제 시리스버스니 이게 서치는 아니 붙이게 됐으니 이제 뒤에 냐와리 기기야 재산
So
then Tendugarajin Yugariji Kunasha. That is as soon as you reach it Yamari. The Shedam Juna Toma Puchituga. The Toma Puti number is Susia. Cook Gare, Kobe is in the Kuritu Shedan Kapuch. Kobe number 8 cook you cheat the tani. What in a number is Susia. Taco by she's house number is suiting every child. The child number in me is suiting Nati Shumani could never shine the Shiba sketch. Tuni any Deuteria.
Ship at the going was
No, didn't get some
So there are a lot of additional, this is kind of a very brief essence of the nature of karma. There's many other significant formulations and explanations that are relevant to the overall subject of karma that, if understood, will give you a much kind of more refined overview of how karma is meant to be understood, as explained in the Buddhist treatises, philosophical works. So the karma is not fulfilled, or it's not a complete act merely by forming the thought that represents the intention or the desire to carry out some action. So that's the initial intention. But if it's, for instance, the desire to harm another person, whether it's to kill them or steal something from them, then in order for that act to be fulfilled, then Yonsu-zopa, so Yonsu-zopa means to come to completion, then it has to go beyond that state of intention. So then there has to be some means that's used how you are going to fulfill that intention, and then it comes to its culmination when you actually cause the aim of your intention to be achieved. And if the other person is your intended object to kill, if you actually cause his or her life to be come to an end, only then have you completed the act of taking the life. So there are all kinds of elements in that whole process that can affect that act to make it either more or less powerful. For instance, you might at some point along the line have second thoughts and decide not to fulfill the act. But the intention initially to take the life still represents some element of karma that you have accumulated mentally. It just was not carried out into action in terms of whatever means, or physical or verbal, whatever, to actually cause your intention to be achieved. So that's one sort of element of karma. Then kind of losing everything, all the things Rinpoche just said. The element of the act itself was described as nambarikje in Tibetan. Nambarikje means vinyapti in Sanskrit, which means causing something to be known. So it means that when your body is in a particular orientation, it can be that orientation of your body can inform or make known to others what state of mind you have. And so the use of the term in the context of karma is that at the moment that the act is being completed, there is that possibility of other people taking notice of it and realizing that you are the agent and it was your intention, and it's visible. It's from observing your physical makeup. Another example of that is if you become angry, for instance, it can affect your complexion. You can be red in the face. So that quality of being red in the face can be read, R-E-A-D, as an indication that you're angry. Right? So that's an informative form, that color of your face. And there are other ways of, faith, when you make other kinds of gestures, that can indicate a virtuous state of mind. So the point is that final point at which you complete an act that marks its conclusion as an act, then is followed by some element of non-informative form, meaning that your own being is somehow affected by the fact that you carried out that action, and that represents the seed of the karma. And that is called nambarikje mayimbe. Suk means avignapti, means something which cannot be directly observed by ordinary people, but it's something that you have done as a result of having carried out the action. You have affected yourself and caused this condition to be established in yourself, and then that remains with you, and then at a certain time in the future, typically, not exclusively, but for example, one of the significant ways in which karma ripens is at the end of your life, as you're facing your death, and as we mentioned before, the attachment to your not wanting to undergo annihilation, the desire not to die, the attachment to continued existence. That desire at that moment has two kind of particular elements. One's called craving, and the other one is called grasping. And there are two degrees of two different intensities of desire, particular kinds of desire, and at the end of your life, those aspects of desire have the effect of unwittingly, you don't know it, but that form of desire has the ability to what's the word, awaken or ripen or setawa means setawa means activate that potential, and then whatever that potential, whichever one of your manifold and infinite numbers of karma might be, the particular one that gets activated then will be the karma that will be the driving force that determines what your next life will be. So this is another aspect of the doctrine of karma that is obviously of great significance in terms of our understanding of the nature of life.
Dati lese tempo sunata, titi tomabu jenipike jikya suna, shisuna, ti nambari jiki suji chugarwa. Dati maangagri dati mige shuma deputele dewa kinde tagire suna, cheda mawa ina orang pangja tabu, orang tabuya suna yibi chikwe te. Jishkagreba. Tati shashagre loma buchine ani shuma dere sunaku tati anjet tingreba. Anjet tige ani poni sudingreba. Tati yashab sudneya giti anjet direba. Anjet na shinji shashya isgere. Yeti titi de namsam nambari chisu titi gadu. Tati kandil sichasana and pige debula devatani kandayasana. Unungu panjata buchari sichirama oki. Tilbaina ti shipatiki.
Oh, did it?
Ale tichis.
So the nature of that condition that is established in your being that determines that your actions have consequences, karmic consequences, is understood in a variety of ways in different Buddhist schools. For example, the most kind of simplistic point of view is usually identified with the so-called Vaibhashika school, which is the early Sarvastivada Abhidharma tradition. And so they have literature and they have explanations, and the Abhidharma Kosha is kind of the compendium of their doctrine. So according to them, they describe that condition, which is the basis for the ripening of karma, as being like a promissory note that you create when you take a loan, when you borrow some money. There's a promissory note, and then the person that you took the loan from has the right to claim that you repay the note. So when the karma ripens, they use it as kind of the calling in of the promissory note of karma. They use a language like that, which is they refer to it as some kind of real entity that is within your being. The prasangikas, who don't believe anything it has any real substantive nature, believe obviously in karmic seeds. They have a very interesting kind of interpretation. So there is a expression that when an entity ceases to exist, right? When an entity exists, right, it is present. When it ceases to exist, it goes into the past, right, and it becomes a shikpa means something which has, which is in a sense ceased to exist. it is an entity that has its existence has terminated. So in the sense that it's and no longer existent, then most Buddhist schools posit that entities of the past, entities that have gone into the past, meaning things that have ceased existing, have no ability to have any impact on the future. They exist as shikpa di tapa sigirwe. Mare oma bilu telwe sigirwe. Mare sigirwe mare kasa rangiwa menje shikpa di hani ze meva sigirwa. So it's an unreal thing. So it's something that has ceased. The term for it, shikpa, means something that has undergone, it has perished, right, and gone into the past. Pramanasiddhis have a view that the seeds of karma are in fact that cessation of the act when it was actually carried out, and that cessation is an entity which is still capable of having an effect. So they say shikpa, that means that entity which is ceased to exist, is functional. It is immobile. It has the ability to affect the future. And that is a very unique notion, which is discussed in the commentaries. So most of the other schools describe this karmic seeds as some potential, which is a positive entity. There is in the fourth skandha, there are mental factors, which we've already addressed, and then there are non-mental relations. Non-mental relations is kind of the relationship between something physical and mental is this non-mental entity, formative factor that exists in the fourth skandha. And so the seeds of the mental afflictions are those conditions which are the potential. They were given some sort of positive status that are the essence of what those karmic seeds are. I think you say that's just a made-up theory, that it's actually the cessation of the act, and that unreal cessation of the unreal act in the first place has the power to have an effect on the future when that karma is ripened. So these are different than explanations or doctrines, the Buddhist philosophical explanations that pertain to the topic of karma. So then a similar description can be given for virtuous acts. So if you make a prostration with a faithful mind, then the act of bowing or putting your hands together or prostrating on the floor, those are the informative form. That is the act itself when it's when it's being carried out. So that would be the virtuous physical act. Then that virtuous physical act can be perceived by others. Then that's the informative form that is the physical act. According to Prasanghika school, the general what we're talking about is following the Prasanghika view. Then when you get up from doing a prostration, then that act, that physical act, no longer exists. Nevertheless, having carried out that physical act with that virtuous motivation, then has a consequence. It has some impact. It has some effect in that it implants some kind of imprint on your being. So according to the non-prasanghikas, that's some sort of the positive entity that exists and it continues to exist as an impermanent thing that has a continuum over time and remains with your being until it ripens, if it ripens. But for the prasanghikas, there is no such positive potential or positive entity that has the capacity to produce a result. It's simply the fact that that virtuous act ceased. And the very cessation of that act is something that also has a similar quality, that it has its own continuum, even though it's a cessation of the act. And that is the potential that you carry with you. So this is, again, the Prasanghika interpretation of how karma retains its ability to have the ability to produce a positive or negative result in the future.
Then you may chat session when you be sympathetic.
그렇죠.
어디
그렇죠.
그 chat session 내가 그 sympathy
그렇죠.
시도가 매도가 대신에 그 바자 지어지게 되게 제우디 그 제제가 저기 선에다 라니 보이는 내가 신주상의
So then most of the schools, other than the Vaibhashikas or the Prasanghikas, their view of physical acts, for instance, have a quality that they're all mental in nature. That is to say, it's not the informative form, for instance, when you're prostrating. It's not the orientation of your body that's the physical act. It's the mental impulse or the mental intention or the mental volition to formulate that physical orientation of your body. It's that mental quality that is the physical karma. So the mental intention that prompts physical behavior, virtuous or non-virtuous, that, if it's physical, that's physical karma, that intention for non-prasangika. And then when that intention is no longer active because you've completed that physical act, then that intention deposits or implants some kind of imprint in your mind, which is the karmic seed or the karmic power to produce some kind of consequence in the future. So maybe we'll leave that there. So, do you have some questions? So you can either rest or you can ask questions or anyway. Microphone?
One question from yesterday. So yesterday we were talking, the topic was the relationship between the mind should be limitless, in its capacity.
Oh, right, okay.
Right? And so we had this very interesting discussion about the relationship between a substance and qualities. So we're talking about the qualities of objects and the idea of something either existing inherently. I don't want to use the word existing, but if Rinpoche could just talk a little bit more about this idea of how quality abides in the substance of relationship. And
mentally, you mean?
Yeah.
And that you don't have to sort of go back to the beginning and carry out whatever it is to generate, in that case, compassion. Like.
Yeah, not so much. Just I think it's a more basic question about the relationship between how quality abides in the substance, as it's explained in the Gyumed commentary in that section about how the mind can develop willingness.
Right. Okay. 그래서 그래서 drola pensieva di nije chembo cor situganlia ane kasa kya damu kya na chi cor to sure antishula sem di ane compare joya di tameva iluveva di toma imba di sem ki chi sumure ane di khatu dela robochiki kharsa di pena tanati yaus kingdom the joy to tango ana sena kharsa sem dan ko kharsa zo sem di kesho sorchi takani kor da sundoing di ninje di ane kuran sem dan gel ne kuran to mai wagi da rangshi yibati gengi ane ko gangyevati kuran karsa sardu jowa dindashi kyamuwachi kuran yage kajetsi ne kuran manyam dugoya mara kuran di dagaranchi kompetu joya gom ne kompetu joya di tameva di karsa di nenga sorchi di kola you want some just clarification of it, right? Di col tanto dos yang jadi sumber ini dah serus dan ini yang jadi sumber.
Tak kaji kita tujuh jembo Jawa Tunggu kumbal tene, ane kumbal thari cimbaya sejajar ba. Tujuh jembo kumbal Jawa Tunggu kumbal thari cimbaya sejajar ba. Di thari cimbaya itu Gyumed terus kumbal kumbal thami pewa di teg maris. ane chu nasi sejajar. Tak chu di ten di chu di shar. Di ten di medem maris. Tak lalu di chu dan kuni jaga maris. chu di ten di medem maris chu di medem maris. Kalau ya ke chu di masih ada ten medem maris. Tak Jawa di ten maris. Ten semseri jam medem maris. Semseri jam medem maris. Tu ninti dia kombitu tu seri dia kombitu tu biar mishaji. Ane maayong dia maris. Tadi ten bahasa di semseri jam medem maris. Ane ini juga bah tumi tu dia hari, kami tu hari. Did
you understand that? Sort of? The starting point was that after it's acknowledged that there may or may not, there may be past and future lives, and so it is possible to continue to cultivate spiritual, knowledge in multiple lives. Then the second sort of position is that may be true, but there are limitations to how much you can develop. It's like limits to human understanding, limits to what a person can develop. So the Buddhist idea is that no, that's not true of the mind. The mind has a unique characteristic, and in the commentary they use the phrase "ten." So "ten" is the notion of the substratum, or the thing upon which something rests, literally. And so the substratum, or the basis that mental qualities rely upon, is awareness. Right? The quality of the mind that is luminous awareness. So the most fundamental quality of our mind. That is something that is literally a firm basis, in the sense that that can be, that exists, that continues to exist, and that can support spiritual efforts in continually. It's never, unlike the example of water as a medium that can be heated. You can only heat water for so long, and then the water will disappear, and then the heat will have nothing to rely upon in order to continue to exist. So the mind is not like that. The mind will always retain the ability to support spiritual qualities such as compassion. And therefore, when you cultivate compassion, also whatever level of development that you gain, they do not become lost. And you can diminish qualities. We gave examples, right? Well, why does everybody not, have great compassion? Well, because hatred can, obstruct it and diminish it. But speaking generally, if you use those two kinds of effort continuously and with the same degree of, devotion and commitment or dedication, then that compassion can be developed, and it will not sort of subside. And so whatever you do, you can build it until it comes to the point, which is the kind of the key element of what we say unlimited, is that it occurs naturally. No effort is required. And that's the unique quality of the mind, that it can support that kind of development of spiritual qualities. So that argument is the second part of that section. Yeah.
Rinpoche was just talking about the Prasannika perspective on karma, and he said that it was the cessation of the act that had the effect.
Right.
My understanding was that cessations are permanent phenomena. And so I was wondering if Rinpoche could expand on how, is it the effect of the cessation, or is there...
Well, right. So this is a unique. So the Prasannika school is the one. Some of the commentaries have a list of what are the unique attributes of the Prasannika school in Gelugpa literature, for instance. And one of them is this: Shikpa, Nobu, Yimba. So Quran Jodi, Rinpoche Shikpa di Nobu Yimba Sumbares. Quran Samala Shikpa Saint di Tapares. Quran Giwayo Amares. And Quran di Nuatri. That Wome, Juta Woma, Tetsola, Shikpa di Nobu Mayimba Sigrawa. Just the Quran di Shikpa Nobu Hajestin in Chogres.
Mami Shikpati Nu Seni Mami Shikpati Jubarva. Nu Sabati Mami Shikpati Julia. Nu Masana Mami Shikpati Mami Shikitu Marva. Mami Shikati Nu Sabati Mami Shikpati Julia. Just Tina Shita the Khensur. Legi Shiba Sati Legi Leg Pragi Chichigi Nibati Leg Chichigi Nibati Pena Umba Chichigi QTV Umba Metabaya Chichigi Umba Lai Chichigi Umba Jebati Umba Metabati Chibi Umba Metabi Chichigi Jushek Miyamari Chiba Chichigi Ra Jutan Chiba Mutbiaba Jasani 랑 깨진 이번에 10을 못 비할 봐.
Yes.
내 그라야. 랑 깨진 이번에 10을 못 비해서 랑 깨지 다가 랑기 그 10을 뒤기게 돼. 단 랑 깨지 다가랑 뭐 집을 뒤기게 해 봐. 군벌 집을 깨봐라. 주시도 말이. 그때는 시던데 마음이 시버디 눈세버디 마음이 시베 유인치. 같은 거 지야지 되가리. 어디 시버디 무비다 주기에 지시.
So,
주기에 버리지.
did you get that? Yeah. So, the first part was saying that an example of a cessation or what is it? Trying to think of destruction of something is something that is due to a condition. It is conditioned. It is brought about by certain other conditions. So one example is that a lamp, an oil lamp, for instance. So as long as there's oil feeding the wick, the lamp will continue to burn. Once the oil or the fuel is exhausted, then the lamp will be extinguished. And that quality of being extinguished is kind of the ideal or the way of thinking of what it means to become extinct. Right? That entities become extinct. In this case, we're talking about karma. So the fact that causing something to become extinct is conditioned is an indication that that condition of becoming distinct then also is, by having been produced, something that does not lose its efficacy. Also, in another capacity, right? So, and he gave another example. The other example was that causes, so we think of the causes that produce a pot, for instance. Those are normally efficient causes that have the ability to create the existence of this entity, which we call a pot. At the same time that the pot is being created, the pot's impermanence is being produced, so to speak. And the impermanence of the pot is something that is this innate condition that from moment to moment, as each moment of the pot occurs, it doesn't require anything else for it to cease to exist. So that's another sort of indication of an active aspect to the cessation of something.
That has been Rinpoche metabolism. Ranjiba Chidu Gulamete, Ranijiba Chid, Rajutam, the Jimmy, the Rangi, Jiba Chidu Gulamete. Ranji Kurangi, Jiba Keva, Dini is an Tata sheep a deer, and Jiba Nobu is an Shiba de Nobu is Tibu, but I do go to Rinpoche Tabari Kanison, Benmone Amaris, Nubishan Mon Soy Amaris, Benmobile Lonely, Nubishan Mon Chi Amaris, just Uncle Tabaris, Silva. 10 years in the dark, Jiba movies and Shiba movies.
So there were two sort of differing ways of describing the phenomenon of ceasing to exist, right? One way, the cessation of impermanent entities is innate to those entities when they are created. So they don't depend on any subsequent factor for them to cease from moment to moment. And that quality of impermanent entities by which they undergo destruction or perishing, they perish from moment to moment, is in fact created by the causes that create the object. This is Tangiro's line of thinking. So in that sense, the destruction that occurs moment to moment with impermanent things is something that is also a created quality. And so therefore, when a karma or when an act ceases to exist, that the fact that the object, the act itself ends, creates the condition of being in a state of cessation. So in that sense, that cessation is something that's produced and something which continues to exist. It continues to have an effect on other things in the future. That's a Tangira point of view. Not easy to I don't need to comment on. The second view, the view of the Prasangikas and others, which is to say that the cessation is something permanent, or Josh, what did I say? Oh, I'm sorry, I meant non-Prasangikas, Svatantika and other Buddhist schools. Typically, their view is that so the cessation of an entity, an object, whatever it may be, some impermanent entity, its cessation is occurs, right? It's an existent. It's something that we can identify as an entity. But when it occurs, right, it is no longer associated with the thing that has undergone cessation. So it can be an attribute of the thing that ceased because that thing's no longer there. And if it is not, you can't associate it with the thing that it's a cessation of, there also is nothing else that it can be associated with. So therefore it has no integrity, it has no validity as an independent entity. And so therefore it is an uncaused, sort of unreal, inefficient, state of no longer existing. And in that sense it's not capable of having an effect on it. So we'll call it a day. Yeah.